All thoughts and opinions expressed on WRHU's Queerly Informed do not reflect the views of Hofstra University, the Board of Trustees, or Radio Hofstra University. All contrasting thoughts or suggestions can be sent to programming at wrhu.org or to room 127, Herbert Hall, 111 Hofstra University, Hempstead, New York, 11549.
Welcome to the third installation of Season 4 of Queerly Informed.
I'm Savaria.
And I am Brooklyn Dottin.
And we'll have all the latest in international, national, and local LGBTQ news.
The U.S. women's hockey team declines an invitation to Trump's State of the Union address.
2 women are arrested for kissing in public in Uganda and are facing life imprisonment.
Pope Leo does not intend to change the Catholic Church's doctrine on queer people.
And more.
In queer entertainment, I'm Bryana Neff with more on Brandy Carlisle, the BBC and the BAFTAs, and the author of Heated Rivalry series.
For Gay History, I'm Bastion Hamilton. We have more on Dawn Kilhefner. Stay tuned to find out more.
For your QI Sports Report, I'm Kaylee Desmarais with a final tally on the number of gold medals won by LGBTQ+ athletes at the Milan Cortina Olympics.
Thank you for joining us today. Let us get into the headlines. The United States women's hockey team, who won the gold medal in this year's Winter Olympics, declined an invitation to attend last Tuesday's State of the Union address. According to footage shared by entertainment and gossip publication Page 6, this happened after President Donald Trump made a joke about the team's attendance whilst on the phone with the U.S. men's hockey team. After inviting the men's team to the address to congratulate the team on also winning Olympic gold, Trump joked that he would have to also invite the women's team or he would face impeachment. The men's team's response of laughter has caused a deal of criticism for its members. The women's hockey team subsequently declined the invitation, citing prior academic and professional commitments. According to NBC, their spokesperson said that the team, nevertheless, considered the invitation a great honor. I do not know why it is appropriate to joke about impeachment by not inviting the women's team, which is just won gold. Knowing that Trump getting impeached means nothing, as he has been twice impeached and has not been kicked out of office. This joke seems even more to be at the expense of the women's team. He is not even being forced to invite them. He just does not seem to want them there. Even if he did not invite them, he would not have been impeached. And this just reeks of sexism right here. Putting aside the fact that this is kind of a ridiculous thing to impeach a president over, however much in poor taste it may be, impeachment is merely voting to bring the president to court. It does not guarantee that the president will be removed from office. So the president implying that he is being forced to invite the women's team when he is not is quite insulting, and it is no wonder that the women's team declined that quote-unquote invitation.
Yeah, the story just, makes me really sad because what do women's sports teams have to do to be taken seriously? Women literally won 8 out of 12 of the gold medals for the U.S. Olympic team this year at the Winter Olympics. They won significantly more gold medals than the men did. And yet we're still not being taken seriously, not even just by the president, which I'm not surprised that the president doesn't take women's sports seriously. But not even the other hockey players on the men's Olympic hockey players take the women's Olympic hockey players seriously, which is so sad to me. And it just proves to me that conservatives have never really cared about protecting the sanctity of women's sports by keeping trans women out of women's sports. Because if they did actually care about that, then they would have no problem celebrating a bunch of cis female hockey players winning Olympic gold. So yeah, I think that's just really telling to me that their passion for protecting women's sports was never actually about the women.
This past Saturday at SNL, Hillary Knight came on alongside Megan Keller, and there were 2 male hockey players there first, and then they joined, and I believe Keller said that it was going to be just, quote-unquote, it was going to be just us. We thought we'd invite the guys too. We thought we'd give them a little moment to shine. So it is nice to see the women's team kind of have this very large public forum to kind of call these male players out on their bad behavior and their unsportsmanlike behavior. I think that's something that isn't really highlighted a lot, is how against just sportsmanship that comment is, and how gross that is to happen. And of course there's going to be backlash. I'm glad there actually is some public backlash about this, and I'm glad SNL is giving these women a platform to kind of call these men out on their weird behavior. So it's nice to see that there is a little bit of backlash against them.
Wendy Faith and Alessi Diana were arrested in the Ugandan city of Arua under allegations of practicing homosexuality. Josephine Angusia, police spokesperson for the region, says, quote, information was received from the community that the suspects have been involved in queer and unusual acts believed to be sexual in nature, besides being allegedly seen kissing each other in broad daylight. This comes 3 years after Uganda passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act, which was immediately recognized as one of the strictest pieces of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation in the world. The act adding on to laws leading to life imprisonment for homosexuality, adding a new offense of aggravated homosexuality, which can carry the death penalty. Its effects are still being felt to this day as multiple human rights organizations that support LGBTQ+ people in Uganda were forced to close in January, just days before the nation's elections. I think the fact that the information has quote-unquote come from the community is deeply troubling. I think this could lead to a lot of queer people turning on each other just to not be treated to a law that will lead to possibly the death penalty. I think that's a very scary, it's a scary thing to hold in front of somebody, and I think that kind of thing could lead to a lot of betrayal in the queer community, which is so, crushing to see that these laws are being used to turn people of the same community against each other.
Yeah, I want to talk about the term aggravated homosexuality because that just really, really stood out to me in this report as something very interesting. I, absolutely hate the fact that, being in a same-sex relationship, being in a queer relationship is something that's considered violent against other people. It's considered an act of violence because, I can't think of a bigger representation of love than being with someone against all odds, being with someone even in a place where people don't want you to be together, people hate you for being who you are. And for that to be considered an act of violence is something that's really heartbreaking and sad to me.
Pope Leo XIV reportedly said that the Catholic doctrine regarding queer people will not change anytime soon. In his first public interview with journalist Elise Ann Allen, who wrote a biography on the new pope, Pope Leo said that the church, quote, must first change attitudes before changing any such church doctrine. Pope Leo emphasized in the interview that he did not want to, quote, fuel polarization in the church, and said that everyone is welcome in the church. The Pope began his papacy last year by stating that he believed that Catholic marriage rights are only to be extended towards heterosexual couples, though homosexual unions may be blessed by priests without the recognition of marriage. Pope Leo, before becoming the Catholic Pope, criticized Western media for, quote, generating sympathy for queer couples and for the, quote, homosexual lifestyle back in 2012. When the Pope says that everyone is welcome in the church, but then also turns around and says that gay people cannot be recognized as legally married by the church, that previous sentiment kind of rings hollow, you know? It just seems as if you're going to say that everybody is welcome, then you should welcome them as they are and allow them to have the same rights as everybody else. I mean, by this logic, you might as well, this may be a bit extreme, but by this logic, if you're not going to recognize the marriage rights of one group of people, then you might as well not do that for everybody else in the church, which is obviously ridiculous. That is not something that should be happening. Everybody should be able to marry whomever they like and have that be recognized by the church or religious institution in which they are in. And also, what does he mean by change attitudes? The attitudes of whom? Does he mean change the anti-gay sentiment or change the acceptance of queer people? Which, given my previous point, it may well be the latter.
Honestly, I might kind of push back against some of that just a little bit, because he made those quotes about generating sympathy, criticizing people for the media for generating sympathy back in 2012, and now he is saying that he doesn't want to fuel polarization, and he's saying that everyone is welcome. That is at least somewhat of a positive change from what he was saying 14 years ago. So, and I think definitely a lot of this is symbolic, and it makes me so curious about what goes into choosing the new pope. There's no room I'd like to be in more than that one. I've always been so curious about it. But I think that obviously there's so much disappointment here that he's saying that the doctrine regarding queer people won't change anytime soon. He's by no means the most progressive person in the world, or even the most progressive Catholic by any means, but there are so many different worse, less progressive choices, less progressive popes that we could have. So it makes me very curious about like why they chose him, this kind of middle ground between conservatism and being super progressive with the church. It's really weird, and I'm not quite sure who he's trying to please with this. I feel like he kind of is just contradicting himself in little ways when it comes to LGBTQ rights, especially within the church. But I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, and I feel like I could see a world where maybe the Pope after this is even more accepting. I think it's still a step in a very tiny step in a better direction, but it's still a symbolic step, and that is one that is not very helpful, especially as in the larger scheme of Catholicism in the world, very, very non-symbolic steps are being taken against queer people. So it's hard to take this at all. I don't know.
Next up, we have our entertainment and history reports with Bryana Neff and Bastion Hamilton.
Queer artist Brandi Carlisle held a benefit concert in Minneapolis on February 21st to raise money for the residents affected by the presence of ICE in the city. The event, which received a turnout of over 12,000 people, raised over $600,000 for nonprofit organization Advocates for Human Rights. Carlisle performed her songs, as well as performing alongside Minnesota-based musical group Singing Resistance. Together, they sang the protest song It's Okay to Change Your Mind. Following the event, Carlisle spoke to the Rolling Stone, saying, quote, "Even people who voted for Trump, who I'm angry with, I don't think they voted for this, and I do think that they can still change their minds." Controversy has erupted over the BAFTA Awards following several incidents during the broadcast where disability activist John Davidson, who has Tourette's syndrome, ticked several offensive slurs during the broadcast, some of which were edited out, and some of which were not. During the broadcast, Davidson ticked a homophobic slur while queer actor Alan Cummings was presenting, which was ultimately cut from the pre-recorded broadcast. However, another instance where Davidson ticked a racial slur during Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo's presentation was not cut from the broadcast, sparking outrage online. According to several sources, Davidson removed himself from the event after that incident, saying later in an interview, quote, "I completely understand its significance in history and in the modern world." It's important to note that Davidson has no control over his tics and was told by BBC that any tics picked up by the microphones would be edited out. Alan Cumming himself addressed Davidson's tics during the event, telling the audience, quote, "You may have noticed some strong language in the background. This can be part of how Tourette's syndrome shows up for some people. Thanks for your understanding and helping to create a respectful space for everyone." Heated Rivalry author Rachel Reed recently announced that the release of the next book in her Game Changer series will be delayed until 2027. Reed, whose books inspired Crave's smash hit television show Heated Rivalry, just announced in January that the third installment of Shane Hollander and Ilya Rosanov's story was in production, and was originally set to be released at the end of the year. However, Reed has Parkinson's syndrome, and her worsening symptoms have made it more physically difficult to write, slowing down her writing process. In an online statement, Reed assured fans that, quote, "This book will be worth the wait. Ultimately, it's going to be a much better book, and that's the most important thing to me." She also made sure to confirm that readers that already pre-ordered copies of the book would receive those copies. For your queerly informed entertainment break, I'm Bryana Neff.
This day in queer past, Don Kilhefner was born. Kilhefner was born 88 years ago on March 3rd. During his life, he worked as an LGBTQ rights activist and community organizer. Most notably, he co-founded the Radical Fairies. The Radical Fairies was a counterculture movement that started in the 70s, focused on blending queer consciousness with secular identity through gatherings supporting communal intimacy, ritualized expression of eroticism, and the idea of chosen family. For your queerly informed history lesson, I'm Bastion Hamilton.
Thank you to Bryana Neff and Bastion Hamilton for those reports.
Welcome to this week's Trans News Break.
On Wednesday, February 25th, Republicans in the House of Representatives introduced H.R. 7661, a federal bill that would censor the basic existence of trans individuals in public schools.
The bill, which has been called the Don't Say Trans Bill because of its similarities to Florida's Don't Say Gay law, would affect class lessons mentioning trans people and prohibit education materials and support groups.
The bill was proposed hours after President Trump's State of the Union address. Because of the vagueness of the bill, trans teachers could be forced to resign or go back into the closet, and could stop schools from affirming trans kids' identities.
That last story stemmed from the State of the Union address Trump gave on February 24th, in which Trump focused on Congress to further restrict the rights of transgender youth.
Trump invited special guests Sage and Michelle Blair, a mother and her child, who in 2023 sued the Appomattox County School Board because the district did not disclose that Sage was identifying as a man.
Michelle claimed that the school's alleged withholding of the information led to Sage running away from home and experienced abuse over state lines.
During his speech, Trump said that, quote, Sage is a proud and wonderful young woman with a full-ride scholarship to Liberty University.
He also said that, quote, we can all agree that no state can be allowed to rip children from their parents' arms and transition them to a new gender against the parents' will, ending with a call to, quote, ban it immediately.
Vanderbilt University Medical Center has announced its decision to stop providing gender-affirming surgeries to transgender adults.
In the February 24th statement, Vanderbilt health representative cited, quote, operational limitations and lack of surgical coverage, but said that it will still provide non-surgical gender-affirming care for those 19 and older.
Prior to the announcement, local publication to the Tennessean said that the Nashville-based medical center was the only hospital to offer gender-affirming surgeries to adults in Tennessee.
The Kansas Division of Vehicles has announced that transgender residents must surrender driver's licenses with updated information as an extreme anti-trans law takes place this week.
In a letter sent to trans Kansans, licenses and other state ID papers that do not match a person's sex assigned at birth are invalid and must be surrendered.
Residents had less than 24 hours to turn in their identification, with the letter including, quote, that means that once the law is officially enacted, your current credentials will be invalid immediately, and you may be subject to additional penalties if you're operating a vehicle without a valid credential.
A former National Park Service ranger who is non-binary was fired for hanging a transgender flag from a peak in Yosemite National Park is suing a number of federal agencies, citing First Amendment rights to freedom of speech.
Dr. S.J. Jocelyn, a wildlife biologist, was fired for organizing a protest where activists scaled El Capitan and hung a massive trans flag for 2 hours.
The superintendent for the park banned the size of the flag in over 94% of the park a day after the incident, firing Jocelyn and informing them the agency would treat the action as a criminal matter. They are yet to be indicted or informed the investigation ended.
Moving over to the UK, transgender youth are now unable to obtain new puberty blocker prescriptions through the National Health Service after it paused a trial on the treatment.
The Pathway trial was put on hold after a regulatory agency raised concerns about the methodology. The trial focused on analyzing the effects of puberty suppressants for trans teens.
This came after UK Health Secretary Wes Streeting indefinitely banned new prescriptions for the medication. Puberty blockers are now completely inaccessible for trans youth in the United Kingdom.
I mean, starting with the State of the Union, a bill, Don't Say Trans bill, with its extreme similarities to Don't Say Gay. I mean, it's not even a surprising thing anymore. Trump's administration has had unprecedented actions against the trans community and against the entire queer community as a whole, and it's alarming at how unsurprising it is, but it still hurts nonetheless. It still absolutely kills my heart just to see this, especially bringing out Michelle Blair, bringing out a special guest to talk about their child who was quote unquote ripped from them and forced to align with a new gender that they didn't want. That is the gender that they want to align themselves with, and the fact that you can't see that, it doesn't make you a good parent. It doesn't make you a good parent for bringing them back and finally getting your baby back. It's not, you're getting your baby back, but you're restricting them. You're restricting them in so many ways that you can't even see. And I'm so glad that, I'm sure Sage is really going to make use of that full ride to Liberty University. I'm sure they'll make great use of that.
The fact that the Kansas Division of Vehicles is telling transgender residents to to surrender their licenses, because if the information on them does not align with their sex assigned at birth, not only is that incredibly wrong, but I just cannot help but think about it's coinciding with the advancement of the SAVE Act, which, if I remember correctly, one of the items on that bill says that you must have a valid ID to be able to vote. You can correct me if I am wrong, anybody here, but a bill has passed. A bill has advanced in Congress that would basically make people show some form of valid ID in order to be able to vote, like a passport or driver's license. You know what an ID is, but the fact that this is happening at the same time as the Kansas Division of Vehicles basically invalidating a bunch of transgender people's IDs, especially ahead of a major midterm election. It's just like coincidence? I think not. And even if it was a coincidence, it does not bode well for transgender people and their right to vote. So this may, I could be wrong here, but I think that this is directly affecting, if not deliberately targeting, the transgender people's right to vote, because yes, transgender people are technically a statistical minority, but there are plenty of transgender people that do not like Trump and his administration and what they are doing, and I believe that the Trump administration realizes that, and they are trying to do what they can within their power, or even not within their power, because when has what is in their power ever stopped them to basically go after their ability to push back against their actions?
I think what we're seeing here, unfortunately, is little by little a systematic removal of trans people from all different aspects of society, especially in the American South, which brings me to the story about the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Vanderbilt is obviously one of the biggest, most respected academic institutions in the South, and they've recently decided to stop providing gender-affirming surgeries, not just to trans kids, but trans adults. So this is one of the few places in this region of the country where people who are trans can get access to this vital gender-affirming care. And they're providing non-surgical gender-affirming care, such as like hormones, to people 19 and older, but these surgeries, they can be absolutely life-saving operations, life-saving things for people. And for them to lose access to this kind of care in a place where so many rights are being taken away from trans people, so many opportunities to be out and proud and exist in so many different ways are being taken away from trans people, especially in the South. And so it's really heartbreaking to me to see that such a respected academic and medical institution is also kind of hopping on board with this.
Before we end off our show, here's Kaylee Desmarais with your Queerly Informed Sports Report.
This year's Olympics was a great success for LGBTQ athletes, who won 11 medals total. There were 5 gold, 2 silver, and 4 bronze medals taken home by 19 athletes. This year, there were 49 out athletes competing across the different events. The gold medal winners include Kayla Barnes, Hillary Knight, and Alex Carpenter, all members of the U.S. hockey team, as well as figure skaters Amber Glenn and Guillaume Césaron, and skiers Breezy Johnson and Mathilde Germain. The silver medals were won by curler Bruce Mowat, and then the 6 openly queer Canadian hockey team players Emily Clark, Aaron Amrose, Emerence Mashmeyer, Brianne Jenner, Laura Stacey, and Marie Philip Howland. Bronze medals were awarded to Laura Zimmerman from the Swedish hockey team, Swedish freestyle skier Sandra Nysland, Belgian speed skater Tanika Dendolk, and finally Canadian figure skater Paul Poirier. The wins don't stop there, as 2 queer engagements took place. Hillary Knight proposed to speed skater Brittany Bow, and Breezy Johnson also got engaged that weekend to Connor Watkins. The medals at this year's Olympics were falling apart. Breezy Johnson broke her medal after only having it for a total of 15 minutes, which was actually crazy. She went pretty famous for that, actually, but it was not the only instance of medals breaking. There were a few of the figure skating medals definitely just fell apart, and it was very much a joke that was taking over the Olympics. And then also I want to talk about the U.S. versus Canada hockey match. It's very much known as a gay matchup because of the two captains of the teams. Hilary Knight and Marie Philipp-Howland have had an Olympic rivalry for a very long time now. And it actually is being seen as maybe the last matchup of those two players. And so it was a very big deal to a lot of people to be able to see them go head to head one more time because they have a very healthy rivalry. It's not slamming each other in the press. It's one that's full of support either way. And it's just very nice to see a positive environment for something that can be so serious with a sport that a lot of the times is so aggressive and aggravated.
It's definitely nice to see, especially with all of the kind of scary LGBTQ stuff going on in just the U.S. It's nice to see on kind of a worldwide stage that you can highlight LGBTQ people, especially queer athletes who are very just under attack in the U.S. It's kind of refreshing and a nice reminder that there is a world more accepting outside of the United States right now.
For your Queerly Informed Sports Report, I'm Kaylee Desmarais.
Thank you for tuning in to Queerly Informed this week here on 88.7 FM, Radio Hofstra University, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thank you to the entire Queerly Informed team for your work on this week's edition.
Join us back here next week to hear the latest in queer news, as well as commentary from our group of LGBTQ reporters.
As always, if you have any suggestions for stories or content that you would like to hear, send them our way through email at queerlyinformedwrhu@gmail.com.
Thank you again to our entertainment reporter today, Bryana Neff, our historian, Bastion Hamilton, and our sports reporter, Kaylee Desmarais, for their work on today's show.
For Queerly Informed, I am Brooklyn Dottin.
And I'm Savaria.
Thank you for tuning in.